The safest and most secure foundation of my life had collapsed in an instant. The dark truth behind my 5-year marriage to Simone came to light that night. What I witnessed at the party was enough to turn my entire past and feelings upside down. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of my eyes. My heart was broken, but why didn't Simone want me by her side that night? What was she hiding? Was it just for fun, or was there a more shocking truth behind it? These questions swirled around in my head, and I was about to find the answers, and this would become a turning point in my life. Looking at Simone, thousands of thoughts flashed through my mind. Simone had been my wife for 5 years, and everything we had built together, all the memories we had shared, seemed to disappear in an instant that night. I saw Simone sitting naked on the man's lap in the hot tub downstairs. It pierced my heart. Seeing the contentment on Simone's face as she shared a room with that man told me everything. Not knowing what to do, I pulled out my phone and recorded the moment. I had to gather evidence of the betrayal that was unfolding before my eyes. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, hoping that this was just a bad dream. But when I opened my eyes, the scene hadn't changed. Simone was still with that man. For a moment, I thought maybe I should get into my swimsuit and go down there, but then I stopped. No, that wasn't my style. Before confronting her, I needed to know everything. I had to deal with this moment and then talk to Simone about why she didn't want to bring me to this party and why she always kept me away from such events. Just last week, I saw a message on Simone's phone about the Christmas party at her company, mentioning that she could bring someone along. When I mentioned this to her, she said, "Carl, you'll be bored. These people only talk about money." At the time, I believed her, and I thought she didn't want me to go because she was thinking about how I wouldn't want to be bored. But now I know there was a very different reality behind her actions. Simone was leading a life she had never told me about, and that night I witnessed it with my own eyes. I began to understand how distant Simone had become recently, how her business trips kept her working late, and how she was attending more and more parties. She said it was all work, but that night I realized the true nature of those work parties. Simone was living a life that had nothing to do with me, and when I close my eyes and think back to it, I feel a deep pain. I remember the last time I saw her when we arrived at the party. She immediately introduced me to a friend, Linda. Simone quickly joined in with Linda, laughing and sharing a strange joke. Linda said, "Wow, you're really married." Simone's face broke into a smile, as if it was just a joke to them. At that moment, something inside me broke, but I couldn't even admit it to myself. My suspicions grew when Simone left me alone in the crowd and disappeared. I looked for her everywhere at the party, and people were having a good time around me, but they ignored me. After a while, Simone returned with 3 men, one of whom had his arm around her waist. The sight made me nervous. "Simone, where have you been?" I asked. Simone smiled and said that we had been drinking tequila, but there was more than just tequila in her mouth, and I didn't want to know what it was. Linda chimed in, saying yes, we had a great time. The strange smell I felt when Simone hugged me shattered everything inside of me. I stayed there for a while longer. Simone laughed with the men, as if nothing had happened that moment. I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth about Simone and find out what she had been doing behind my back. As Simone and the men walked towards the penthouse, I followed. When they reached the pool, Simone was already in her bikini and had gone into the water with the 2 men. That was the moment that completely destroyed me. I retreated to a corner and watched it all happen. My marriage ended at that moment. I had to come up with a plan to confront Simone. When Simone once again left me alone, Linda approached me with a smile and said mockingly, "I thought you had an open marriage." I didn't know what to say. What kind of question was that? Simone had betrayed me, and these people were treating betrayal as normal. At that moment I realized that the people around Simone were used to this kind of thing, and perhaps they all knew about Simone's secret. "Do you think Simone would do something like this?" I asked incredulously. Linda replied, "Of course, she always has. And marrying you hasn't changed a thing." Those words made me face the harsh truth. Simone had been leading a different life for a long time, and I had only just realized it. The time had finally come to confront Simone with the video on my phone. I went downstairs to find her. Simone wasn't at all surprised when she saw me, as if she had expected everything to turn out like this. "What are you doing, Carl? Why aren't you wearing a swimsuit?" She laughed, and this casual attitude drove me crazy. I showed her the phone and played the video. Her face instantly turned ugly, but then she returned to her indifferent expression. She said, "Carl, I love you." From that moment on, there was only one thing I wanted to do: get a divorce. I took off my wedding ring and put it in her hand. I said, "We're finished." Her eyes welled up with tears. She said, "No, Carl, don't leave me." But I no longer believed in her tears. I had no more feelings for her inside. I packed up all her belongings and told her I would never come back. The divorce proceedings were made more complicated because Simone claimed to be pregnant, but she didn't even know who the father was. This only made me want to stay away from her even more. During our many years of marriage, I no longer felt anything for her. I could never have imagined that Simone would betray me so deeply. My trust, love, and respect for her all collapsed that night. When I learned of Simone's betrayal, the pain I felt was indescribable. Betrayed, but I knew that this betrayal would only make me stronger. I was no longer the Carl of the past. The life I had shared with Simone was over. Once the divorce proceedings had begun, I planned every detail with my lawyer. Simone did everything she could to convince me, but it only made her more desperate. She had no way back, but I was becoming more and more free every day. The legal process of divorce takes time, but for me, the real separation had already begun. In the end, when it was all over, it was truly an emotional separation. There was a huge void. Simone and her fake life had completely left me, but that void would gradually be filled over time. I would go back to my life and start again. Simone was no longer part of my life. Everything we had was in the past. The most important lesson I learned from this process was never to trust anyone completely. After the divorce, Simone and Linda lived together for a while, and they both worked in a small shop. I saw them a few times, but we never came face to face. We had become two completely different people, and the shadow of our past had made us strangers. A few years later, I moved on with my life and met someone named Claire, just like me. Claire had also suffered betrayal and a difficult divorce. We slowly built a relationship, initially just chatting and opening up to each other about our pain. A deep connection developed between us, and we had been through so much that we were able to understand each other better. In the early days, Claire and I just went for walks together and spent quiet time together. As time went on, we learned to trust each other. Our bond grew stronger and stronger. Claire has brought peace and tranquility into my life. I realize that I feel better when I'm with her, even though not everything can be healed immediately. I feel stronger when I'm with her. One evening, Claire asked me, "Do you find me attractive?" And I answered very sincerely, "I find you attractive in every way." We move forward slowly and carefully. The wounds of the past still very deep, but we are determined to heal them together. Simone has brought me all the peace and tranquility I need, and Claire has brought me life and taught me to trust and love again. I have finally left the scars of the past behind me. My experiences with Simone were an important lesson for me, but now with Claire I can look to the future with hope.